Hey guys, it's Today we are going to be quantizing some guitars for this cover I'm working on. But of course, first, the intro. So, quantizing, in case you didn't know, is, in this case, the process of taking your recorded audio and editing it so that every note aligns perfectly on the grid. It's a very common technique that audio engineers and their assistants use to take less than stellar playing and make it essentially perfect. And of course, there are multiple ways you can approach such a task. One that might first come to mind is simply taking your audio and cutting it at each note, and then manually moving them to be right on the grid. This method has some problems though, in case it wasn't obvious. Just cutting your audio and moving it without compensating will result in noticeable gaps, which sounds something like this. Of course, you can avoid creating gaps when editing this way by recording your audio at say 20 to 30 beats per minute slower than your final tempo. This way you could record your edits, and when you reset your beats per minute to the appropriate tempo, you'll have plenty of overlap on the clips. Crossfade from there and you're good to go. I think that's pretty tedious though, and in my opinion it's much faster to quantize your guitars using your DAW's time stretch feature. To help show you guys how I'm going to do it, I'm actually going to track some guitars for a cover song I'm working on. Happy Song by Bring Me the Horizon. The guitar I'm using here is an NK guitar headless 6-string. It's a Chinese-made guitar I got a few months back for a pretty great value. I'll be doing a review of it pretty soon with the help of my friend Ainsley. He's got a Strandberg Classic Bowden 6. We're gonna see if the cheap Chinese knockoff compares at all, but that's a video for another day. Let me also just say before I get started on tracking that I'm definitely no guitarist. I bought this one just to practice, but I don't think Happy Song is really that hard of a song anyways, so I'm sure it'll be fine. I just want to justify the likely terrible playing that I'm going to be editing later, so. That being said, I will be back after I get these tracks laid down and show you how to turn this sloppy mess into a perfect performance. Okay, that took way too long, but it's done, finally. Now that we have all the guitars tracked, it's time to make them sound not horrible. First though, I'm using Cubase as my DAW. I haven't used others, but as far as I know, most popular DAWs should have a similar time stretch functionality, so if you're using another DAW, try looking for that function when you do this in your own mixes. Alright, so anyways, we have a couple of the different guitar parts here. As you can see, I didn't bother tracking over the entire song. I'm going to be editing these guitars and just copying and pasting them. In most cases, I find that this is just fine, especially if you're working with people who don't have huge egos and don't need to say that they were recorded everything. I have a negative ego when it comes to guitar playing. I suck, and so I wanted to make it as easy as possible to get this done as quick as possible, and so I just recorded the bare minimum of what I need to be able to make it work for the song. Plus, if I tried recording the entire song, the time-lapse would have been probably like 40 minutes long. And this will make my editing a lot quicker and make the time that it takes to get the song complete a lot shorter in the long run, because I have much less to edit. So I've got the intro guitar here, or the verse guitar. This basically pops up in the first half of the song. It's just kind of like a centered split coil sound. Towards the end here, you've got the bridge guitar, which is like a filter guitar. I actually wasn't good enough to play it all in one go. I actually had to do the open notes here and then the hammer-ons on top. I'm just gonna cut those in. Cheating. And then I've got the rhythms, of course, left and right here. This is for the actual full verse rhythm guitars. And then this is the chorus. This is the breakdown at the end. Lead guitar here, of course. Basically just gonna go through and quantize these and make them sound a lot better than I played them. So starting with the intro guitars here, the verse guitar, what I like to do is in Cubase, you could crank up the waveform height with this little thing over here. I like to do that so I can see what I'm doing. I will uncheck the align to grid so that I can move it over basically until that first note falls naturally on the grid there. That looks nice. So the way I started is by making a grid cut incision at the very starting note here. I'm also going to make a cut here and just keep that. That's going to be like the little bit of a front tail for this. Now is when I'll actually go through and make all of my cuts to each individual note here. We can listen. Alright, so this is a pull off here. I know about where that note starts. So what I'm doing here is I'm pressing the Alt key in Cubase. This brings up the cut tool. So I'll just simply use it to slice the audio where I think the next note starts, which is about right there. And then I use the Q key in Cubase that sets it to quantize. It snaps it to the grid, just like that. Perfect. And I'm just going to keep going through note by note, getting these all exactly where they need to be. Alright, so one point here to make is that on some hammer-on and pull-offs, where you're not picking, there's not a really nice sharp attack to look out for. After a while of editing like this, you kind of know about where to cut at. I usually find that it's okay if you can't tell where the note changes by looking at it. You could always just use the next note, quantize to where it needs to be. Most cases, that'll work out just fine. If you want to, you could like inspect it further. Typically, if you look at the waveform, you can see there's a kind of a pattern to this note here. And then you can see right about like, I want to say like right about here-ish is where it seems to change into a different pattern. So I'll cut right somewhere about there. And that's usually just fine. Another important thing to note, not that this really applies in this song, is the quantize up here. Now, if you're in another DAW, it's going to be different for you. Most of them should have a selector for what kind of quantizing you want to do. In this case, I'm just using 16th notes because that's probably the lowest I think this is going to go at all. Be careful in parts where you have triplets. In Cubase, I have to actually physically change it to do a triplet so that it will actually quantize to the triplet. You can see that the meters here changed. In this song, it's easy though. It's all like 16 notes or higher, so I set it to 16 and roll with that. Alright, so that's it. I have cut up all of these tracks for this first guitar here. Of course, this, as it is, sounds horrible because it's got a bunch of gaps in it. So that's unacceptable. As you can hear though, everything's in time. We just gotta get rid of those gaps. So what I like to do in Cubase is I like to highlight all the notes, and then I'll control click and unhighlight the last note. The function in Cubase is accessible by going to audio, and you go to advanced, and it's close gaps, time stretch. I have it set to Alt Q for making my workflow a bit faster, so we'll just do that. As you can see, it went through and time stretched every single individual clip. Just to be safe, I like to just click and drag and crossfade using X just to make sure. And then I'll go and I'll control right click and bounce the audio. So now this is like a fresh take that was recorded perfectly the first time. One thing to also note is that I'm working with DI here. You could record like with your amp sim or through your amp and mic up a cab, and you could try to edit guitars with that, but every time I've tried to edit a wet guitar signal, you end up with these weird odd effects that just make it sound horrible, really. So I always record DI and then I reamp later. As you can see right now, I've just got TSE X50 open, and I'm using that as an amp sim just to work with for the moment while I'm editing this. I'll reamp it in a little while and get final tones. But this clip is edited, this clip is done, so what I'm going to do to completely finish it off is just do a cut at the beginning and the end to get rid of the noise. And then one at the end. I make sure not to cut it off right at that last note there, because you'd end up cutting off a part of what makes it sound natural, which is like the note release. Then I'll fade in, fade out, and this clip is done. So now I will go ahead and take this and copy and paste it wherever it needs to go throughout the song. I usually take it and put it right over onto the grid. That way I can copy it right on the bar and never have an issue with it being like a couple milliseconds ahead or behind. Alright, I think that's all of the verse guitar that is in the song. Now that I copied these, I'm going to get rid of that blunt cut I made at the beginning by just stretching them both back, and it's already good to go. Alright, next up is going to be the rhythm guitar. I should just start on one side by muting the other, doing the same thing that I did for the other process, of course. Okay, I've got both of those done. You can see all those gaps. Highlight the ends. Control, click and drag, highlight. It deselects the ends there. Now I could just hit Alt Q or go to audio, close gaps, time stretch. And they're good to go. Bounce this. And then make the cuts at the beginning and the end to get rid of noise. There. The end looks pretty good, actually. Trash the excess, fade it in and out, and it's good to go. Now, luckily, this riff is repeated a couple times, so I'm just going to copy and paste it. All right, now that I've copied and pasted, I'm going to add the space at the beginning to these clips back. There. And now we're going to do the chorus. When I have parts like this, which frequently happens when recording other people, where we'll track parts separately, and so I get to a point where I've edited one part and need to work on the next part, what I usually do is just cut off a little bit of the last part that we worked on, so that way I can actually see the beginning and transients of the next part. And then, of course, when I'm done editing this part, the chorus part in this case, I'll leave enough space so that I can crossfade them later and have them be seamless. In this case, I actually did a good thing, which was when I recorded the chorus, you can see if I back it up, I actually played a little bit of the riff beforehand, which allows me to make crossfades that sound a lot more natural because the transition is still there, instead of just cutting into playing right where the chorus would start. It also makes it a little bit more difficult to see the transient of the note starting, so. I'm gonna take it like that, which seems about where the slide is going into that fret. I'm gonna use that as a starting point. Should be just fine. All right, and same routine from here. right, so the chorus is done. Actually, before I do this, I'm gonna come down here, give myself a little bit of extra space. It's important that I'm doing this, and why I'm doing this is basically because whenever I time stretch these, it's going to create a whole new audio file for them. So before, what I could do is just take these audio clips, which were just my take from recording, drag them back to get more of the audio. Whenever I Alt-Q, time stretch these, they're now new audio clips and I can't access the information that was before them. So to save myself, I'm gonna give myself a little bit of leeway here from the previous sample. When I time stretch this, that way I'll have an extra bit of information to work with right here so that I can crossfade this with the riff before it. That being said, highlight the last notes, Control, click and drag, and find that first note, which I got it. Perfect. And now Alt-Q. All right, now the chorus is done. So what I'm actually gonna do now is take that, I'm gonna highlight these bad boys, and also the ends here, and bounce them. Now they're done. So what I could do is go back to the incision, the cutoff that I made earlier, correct that. See, they're good. Crossfade them, and now they're great. Make sure I've got to fade out at the ends. All right, now because this audio repeats throughout the song, I'm just gonna bounce the entire thing. And all I need to grab is from here onwards, because in the song, there's another verse section next and another chorus. So all I'm gonna need is this bit here. Just gonna cut there, Control C to copy that and paste it where I need to. Gonna crossfade here. Sounds great. There's gonna be another verse guitar here. I'll grab from one of these and drag it over. Or at least in the original song, I think there's another verse guitar here. There might actually not be. I think they might just have weird guitar noises. I can't remember. I'll have to reference the original track later. But for now, I'm gonna assume, yes, there is. It goes there. Move on with my day. And the chorus repeats twice here, so gonna cut at the chorus, copy and paste it where it needs to go. Crossfade. Make sure there's a fade out at the end. For the break, perfect. Now this is great. So bounce it once more. We're gonna look at this abysmal take of this interlude. Filth guitar here. Do what we have to do to make it not sound so bad. So looking at this bottom part here. Not too bad. It's just open notes. So I actually have that, and I have this. Now I need to make these two mesh, become one. What I'm gonna do just to keep it clean is to edit them separately. So I'm gonna go and just make sure these are already perfect on the grid, and then I'll do the same with these. That way I could just cut right on the grid where the notes start and end, and the transitions should be seamless. So I'm just gonna start by doing the interlude guitar first. Now I'm finding that the transients here are a little bit difficult to find. You kind of see them. They're kind of hard to make out perfectly. So in Cubase, you could always just enlarge the track. It makes them bigger, and now they're more clearly defined. You could probably do something similar if you're in another DAW. Now I'm going to look at this top one here, make sure it's all good, and then make the cuts where I need to. All right, so that's bounced and good. Now I'm just gonna cut exactly where these need to be fused. Highlight both of them, make my cuts. Cut off the excess there. I'm gonna cut off what I need to take out here. Move them down. Then crossfade, of course. And now, make my cuts at the beginning and end here to get rid of excess noise. In this particular part of the song, the cut here should be pretty straight on because it's kind of part of an effect. So I'm gonna cut on the dot there, cut off the natural sounding tail, fade in on this clip, slight fade out on this one, and bounce. Perfect. Now on to the breakdown. Alright, breakdown's done. Same as before. See, I can fool you into thinking I'm a competent guitar player. Alright, cut off noise. Alright, perfect, fade out. And that's all the rhythm guitars for the song, so bounce the entire track. Same thing with the verse guitar up here, so this is pretty much a completed track. Depending, I gotta double check on that one over here, but probably. Last thing I want to do is just get this lead guitar down. Alright, and that's basically it. Guitars for this song are done. Tracked throughout. And what do we start with? We started with nothing. We started with bare minimum effort, which for me is a lot more than it should be. So that's basically how you take a sloppy performance and make it perfect. Of course, some may argue against editing this way, which is totally fine. Many believe that if you can't play something live, you shouldn't write it. I also believe that it's the artist's job to learn and practice their material meticulously before entering the studio, so that you're fully prepared to play nearly perfectly, so that you don't need such drastic editing just to make your song listenable. Being prepared before hitting the studio will save you so much time and money, and if you're a growing artist, you need to be as smart about your spending as possible. As an audio engineer, I believe I should do everything in my power to achieve the best results possible. Sometimes that includes taking loose playing and making it tight. In fact, I'll typically go through and edit all tracks like this, regardless of how tight the playing is, just to ensure a consistent standard of quality for my mixes. And of course, not all mixes require such fancy editing. Many styles of music actually benefit from a more loose playing style, although a lot of modern music is really best executed with the cleanest performance as possible. And at the end of the day, time is money. When I'm tracking somebody, I know what I can work with. If the take wasn't played 100% perfectly, but all the notes are there, I'll often move on to the next part in lieu of tracking over and over until we get the perfect take. Because when it comes down to it, I know how long I'm going to take editing the stuff later. But what I don't know is how many times we're gonna have to keep recording take after take just to get the perfect playing that needs to be on the record. Sometimes it's just easier and more cost-effective to fix it later. That being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped you in some way. And if you liked the video, of course, be sure to give it a like and consider subscribing if you like this kind of content. I'm gonna get back to mixing this track, so I will catch you on the next video. Thank you so much.